ideally the friction goes down, and the next note, which I will purchase, it should be a whole lot easier. And it was kind of like, I got to get the wife on board with this too, right? Like, she wants to understand where the investments are and what we're doing. So I kind of kept her in the loop, and I always do on all this stuff, but she understands where things are. And if my next note will probably be larger than 15K. So I want her to be on board and understand like why I made the decision I did.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you start small and then you go from there. You kind of expand onto it. Great. And then we also talked about you invested into, like, not actively but passively into short-term rentals, right?
Yes. I've always wanted to do short-term rentals, but we have a 6-year-old, and up until probably about this year, I did not have the time to essentially get into the hospitality business, which is what I view a short-term rental as. It was just, there was just too much demand from a child, of a toddler growing up, baby and a toddler. So I was looking for a way to get that same exposure, but not purchase a property. So I found a private placement fund that got recommended to me. And I love what they were doing, because they were and are ridiculously transparent about revenue, about expenses. They open their books, and I felt like it was an easy way to get exposure to this. And they focus on short-term rentals that are not just houses, but they focus on the amenity side. Like, hey, here's a short-term rental with a pickleball court, or here's a short-term rental with a pool and a hot tub and a fire pit. And they definitely have a niche, and they have replicated their success in different states in the country. So to me, and again, there's levels of investing. I think the minimum they had was 25 grand, which is what I put in. And I get quarterly payments out of that. I got the first one in November, but I also get to learn by the same process, because they write up a very detailed evaluation of every single quarter, what went right, what went wrong. Like, for example, we had hurricanes come through some of the properties. So they were very transparent, like, hey, it's going to cost us this much money to rebuild this and repair it. But to me, it was a good way to kind of get my feet in and learn without actually buying a short-term rental. So again, I always look at this as like, you're paying tuition to learn, essentially, like to learn how to buy a note, to learn how to do a long-term rental or a single or short-term rental.
So how many properties are in the fund?
I want to say there is 400 different properties across 2 different funds. So probably about 200 in this individual fund.
Got it. And they're adding more properties to this fund?
They do.
They find something?
They do, but they have a very rigorous process of how they vet a property, what the property performance is, how they do their own pro formas on it. But like, a lot of times if you put money with someone, it's not as transparent, right? You don't know how they make decisions. You don't know what their criteria are. These guys, that's what really got me and it was a bunch of, some of the folks on the team were like, tech refugees, I would say, who come from technical backgrounds, Airbnb.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, okay, they understand how technology can be leveraged to help them do what they do.
Nice.
So that was appealing as well.
So where you have any other investments or any other style of investing into real estate apart from the 3 things that we talked about? So we talked about duplexes, and then we talked about note investing and the short-term rentals, right? The fund investing.
Yep. Those are the only vehicles that I'm in today. And again, largely it's just, I was always looking at thinking, what's the least amount of time commitment that I can invest in real estate without taking time away from spending time with my daughter. So, the note passive.
You have built a system in place, because even with your duplexes, it's like hands off to you. And notes and, the fund investment is definitely passive. So I think that's a great model to get started, where you're making good returns at the same time. It's kind of like, nothing is ever passive, but it's passive active.
Yes. Yes, and that's what I was looking for. Like, I don't mind the manage the manager or making decisions once in a while. I mean, the whole thing might take a couple hours a week, maybe.
Yeah.
It's not the time demands are just not there. Not to say that I don't want to get into short term rentals. Like we had before the baby was born, we were looking in Panama City because it's it's pretty quick drive to get there from Atlanta, and we never pulled the trigger on condos. And I wish I had rental, right on the beach. But maybe we'll get back there one day and get into that space.
Okay. So what's next for you? So in what direction are you focusing next? Where are you, how are you strategizing yourself for the next, let's say, 6 months to a year?
Yeah, my next thing is going to be I'd like to get a larger property still in Western New York. So I'm looking at a sixplex and a fourplex. So I'd like to get to that 10 doors a little bit faster than just collecting duplexes over the years. So that's what I'm kind of looking at now. In fact, I actually sent an email to the agent this morning asking for the rent roll and all the documentation. But at the same time, I feel like the note space is also a really good place to be. There's a point where I think I kind of want to do what you're involved with as well, Ray. Is funding fix and flips is also, I think, a great area to be in, and learning about how to structure a note and seller financing and how to lend money in general seems to be a direction I also want to be in. Like I go back to that. If you're going to be anything in real estate, be the bank. Fewer headaches than you might have in other ways, other areas. So, but that's kind of where I want to go. Like maybe a bigger note, perhaps with a property attached. There's also this kind of compelling, again, going back to this. I know we were talking about this a little earlier. I think real estate investing always has this shiny object syndrome where there's so many different areas of real estate. You're like, oh, what about this? And what about this? And for me, the idea of flipping land is also kind of interesting too. Now that I've bought my first parcel of land, there's a whole set of folks who try to buy land that's in the path of progress, that ultimately a developer purchases to build new builds, as you were mentioning earlier. And that's kind of compelling too. Like, how do you build can you find a piece of land that is in the path of progress that you could carve up into parcels and sell those independently? So I feel like that's also a compelling direction as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different ways how you can make money with real estate. It just depends, right? Like notes and investing into the fund. Well, notes is more like a interesting. With the fund investment, you will still get the depreciation and all that because they'll still get you the K1. Sometimes you want that depreciation side of the things, and definitely those duplexes or the sixplex and the tenplex that you're looking to buy. That's your, let's call it an active portfolio, right? Because you can make the decision on them. You can decide when to force the appreciation on them. You can decide when to sell them, what to do next with that. Although you are passively invested in those in the sense of you're managing it passively. You're not passively invested, but you are actively invested, but your management style is passive on that.
Yes, exactly.